everybody know that I'm going to start the recording at this point so that we can share them with other folks who may not have been able to be on. If you don't know me, I am Tim Reed. I'm the Vice President for Membership and Operations and sort of the jack of all trades for ODK, I think, at this point. And just got off a call right before this started with the National Awards Committee to talk about the Clay Grant process. So we are well underway and things are going well. So I'm going to share my screen. If at any point you can't see or hear or anything, I'm going to do a couple things here. I need to get my chat box back so I can see my chat. If you've got a need to throw a chat in, please feel free to do that. And then I also got to double check to make sure that I can get all the people come in. It looks like we've got everybody in. So I think as soon as she is in, Corinne, are you in? Oh, I have to admit her. Hold on. I'm going to introduce somebody here real quick. So Corinne Kenny, who just popped in the screen, is one of the newest employees of Omicron Delta Kappa. She is our membership services consultant. She has joined us part-time. And some of you may be hearing from her as she helps me with a variety of projects around ODK. So Corinne, wave hi to everybody. Yeah, she's going to help us try to get some circles back online and help other circles with ideas, and then also potentially even help with things like Leader of the Year and projects as we go through. So this is her first official ODK webinar. So just wanted to introduce her. So, all right. So we're going to talk about the Clay grants. This thing will let me do what I wanted to do. There we go. Just if you haven't done this, we've all done this, but I'm just going to keep putting it out there every time. Mute when you're not speaking, but please ask questions. I really do want you to ask questions as we get through this. And if, I'll have a question period at the end. You can save it to the end, but if there's something that's really unclear, throw it in the chat because I keep the chat up, or you can unmute and shout at me. Either way, please let me know if you've got a question. And then please make sure you're sharing this information with your circle as you develop your Clay grant, because it's not supposed to be a process that is developed sort of just by the advisor. It's really supposed to be a circle process. So share this with them so that they know and they can help be part of the process of building a Clay grant. This is what we're going to talk about today. I'm going to briefly the history and purpose, the timeline and process, which has changed this year because that leads into the application system. And then some best practices for successful grants. We'll review some of that. And then questions. And after this presentation, I will send you this, and I'll also send you a couple of other documents that we'll talk about through the process so that you've got everything that you need to know. So the history and purpose. The grants are named for Maurice A. Clay, who was the first executive director of Omicron Delta Kappa. And Clay was really responsible. He had a lifelong student affairs professional, and he was really critical in trying to move ODK from being just a leadership recognition organization, which it had kind of slipped into, to being a leadership development organization. He was very keen on ODK really taking on that role of leadership development. And so these grants were developed and named in his honor in the 1990s. And they've been sporadic. There was some sporadic, but we've been steadily granting them for at least the last 15 years. They are specifically designed to enhance leadership development through ODK circles, the development of the circle, but also leadership development on the campus. The idea is that ODK should have an impact through its programs on the campus. And if you're on the webinar last night, we talked about how every circle should have a signature leadership program and a signature service program. ODK Clay grants can really help with that signature leadership program, because that can be some of the funding that drives the development of a new program or the enhancement of an existing program. So, you know, in memory of Maurice Clay, these programs are really put on here to make sure that ODK circles have the ability and some funds. It's not a lot of money, but there is some funds to help you build this program. So let me admit somebody else here. Okay. The purpose, as I've said, is to provide seed funding to circles for the development and implement leadership programs. Please note, in the name is the clue to the application, to the successful application of everything. Leadership Development Initiative, to encourage circle programming and leadership development. That's what's crucial here. And that's what a lot of circles who have not gotten grants in the past have sort of missed, that it is a leadership development opportunity. It's not just a program. And I'll talk a little bit about it, but you know, a speaker can be a leadership development opportunity, and a speaker can just be a speaker. And so there's got to be something a little different than just bringing somebody to campus or supporting another office that's bringing a speaker. It's how is that a leadership development opportunity for the circle and for the campus. I'm double checking to make sure there's nobody waiting. Okay. So the timeline in the process. So here's the timeline. Obviously the grants are open. Today is the webinar. Applications are due at, well, that says 11:59 p.m., but it's, I think it's 11:45 because everything's on quarter hours with the new system. So just get it in before 11 o'clock on the 30th Eastern time. Those of you on the West Coast, sorry, Michael. We've talked about having the deadline be 2 a.m. so that you guys have midnight, but whatever. The committee will start reviewing things on the week of November 2nd, and then the week of December 7th, sometime around there, we will announce the grants. One of the things that's a little different in the process this year is that, and we'll talk about this when we get to Kaleidoscope, because the system has the ability to notify through that system, there'll probably be two different notifications. You'll get the official notification from an ODK email, but you may also be notified through Kaleidoscope, because when in Kaleidoscope, when we click the button that says grants awarded, then you would be able to see that in your application pool. So you may actually know that you've gotten a grant before it's actually you've gotten the email from the headquarters. So just be aware of that. And then there is a form that goes out to every circle who is given a grant. It is a grant, is it a letter of acceptance, and those are due by January 15th. And those are very important, because that basically is saying the circle is committed and we'll do this program. And if we don't get that, we will go to the next circle in the pool and say, well, this circle decided they couldn't accept it, and give it to somebody else. And we actually have had a circle who, between the time they applied and the time of that, they decided they could not do the grant, they didn't do the acceptance, and we gave it to the next one in line. So there's always that possibility. So please, if you get accepted, make sure you get your acceptance form back to us. It's a web form, so it's pretty simple to do. Let me go back. I'm just going to say questions. No raised hands on that one. Pretty clear. Okay. So the process, this year we are using a company called Kaleidoscope, and they are going to handle all of our application processes for us this year. Clay grants, National Leader of the Year application, and scholarship applications. So there's some great things about this new system that will allow us. It is a smart application system. Once you've set up your basic information, that is saved, and you can come back into this application system anytime you want. One of the great things about this with the Clay grants and with scholarship applications is you don't have to have all your information in advance. In the past, the application was a start-stop process. Once you started the application, you either had to finish it or abandon it. Now you can come in, you can get it set up, you can do a few things, save it, go away, come back, log in again. So you're probably all familiar with these kind of systems. national application systems. So we're moving into the 21st century by doing this. This is the first time we've used this, so we're still working through a few things, but for the most part, it's still best to have as many of your documents prepared in advance as you can, but you can always go in and change things. Until you hit submit, everything is malleable and changeable. Once you hit submit, then it's in the system and you can't go back and change it. So let me show you what it looks like. So what you're going to do is you will go to the link, you will create a login and an ID. One of the things that I want to warn circles about is if you're using a circle ID. Some circles have ODK at JMU or whatever that is. So if there's multiple people who have access to that email, those people, if you use the same password, they will have access to this application. So make sure that you only have the people who have access to the application that you want. Also remember that the communication is going to go to that email. So if you use a circle email, but you are looking for communication to your personal email, that's not going to happen. So you're going to need to make sure you're following, the email that you have put into the system. And of course, you can always change those kind of things later on, but you really want to keep a consistent thing for this process. So if this will show me, I'm not sure. So can you see the ODK? So let me reshare, because sometimes the sharing thing does weird things. So let me reshare my screen.
So you're saying we could use like a personal email, like a Gmail, to not use our school email?
No, you should use your school. Some circles have an email for the circle. So it's the ODK JMU at jmu.edu or something like that. When I was at VCU, we had ODK VCU at vcu.edu. But a lot of people had access to that email and to the passwords. So you want to make sure that whatever you're using for this, it's secure. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
And the communication, once you've set that up, the communication is going to go to whatever that email is. So if you're looking for it coming to your professional email at ODK, but you've sent it to the circle one, you won't see those emails. So you won't see reminders and things like that. So this is what it looks like when you first go in to the award. It shows you all the criteria. It shows you the due dates. It shows you all of the criteria, and then you're going to begin your application. Now, I've already set up my system, so it automatically recognizes me. But then at this point, you would begin into the process. Oops, it says I'm not eligible to apply. Well, it's because I've already got one in the process. So I'm going to show you.
I have a quick question.
Yep.
Regarding the email addresses, are you able to change that if you already put one email in the system?
I believe so. I think you can go into your dashboard settings and change your email.
Thank you.
There is always at the bottom down here where it says support for Kaleidoscope. If you ever have questions about the Kaleidoscope system, something like that, can I change my email? You can send an email to the support system because they manage all of that. We don't manage any of that. So if you've got questions about the technology, you can email them. If you've got questions about the grant itself, we want to try to do this or we want to try to do that, what do you think? That email would go to me. But technical things, you're going to want to use this support button down here. If you're having problems with some thing, and you can always shoot me an email and say, hey, I've been trying to get through to support and they're not responding. They respond really fast usually. So, but if for some reason you're not, please do not hesitate to email me and I will get in touch with them. So right now you can see there are two. This is my panel as a reviewer or thing. You can see that there's already 2 applications submitted. So there's already a couple of folks that are ahead of the game. No worries, you still have till October 30th, so don't worry about it. And then what you will see when you nope, that's not what I wanted to do. Sorry. There we go. So I don't have any applications complete at this time, but once you've completed the application, this will be your panel for your application. It looks very similar to a scholarship thing, but it'll have your name, what you've applied for. We all call them scholarships, but the grant is here. It'll also have the status over here. So submitted or accepted, rejected, will be there eventually. So this is what your dashboard is going to look like once you have started your process. Once you've created an application and logged yourself in, no matter what point you are in that, then you'll come back to this page. Make sense? Okay. Again, we're still experimenting. This is new for us, so there's things that we don't quite know. I'm going to show you, this is what it looks like from the reviewer side. As you can see, there's the people who have submitted. The reviewers are going to use this. They are going to be able to review every application in real time. So it makes it really easy for us for them to go in at any point that they want. It used to be that all the applications had to be submitted and then they had to review. Now they can review as applications are submitted. They will be assigned applications. No one who is at a circle or was initiated at a circle will review your application. So, you know, Mike, we don't have anybody from Concordia, but if we had somebody from Concordia on the board, they wouldn't review that application. We've got, you know, we know that a couple of circles are going to submit, and we've already eliminated those committee members from reviewing that circle. So it's a very secure process in trying to make sure that it's fair and that no circle gets an advantage. Questions about Kaleidoscope or about this process? Have you all used these kind of online applications? My guess is some of the students probably have for scholarships, but yeah.
I haven't. Where do we get access to the Kaleidoscope?
So there is a link in a couple, and I'm going to jump back to my PowerPoint here real fast. Let me go back and reshare. Oops, sorry. So I will send you, there's a couple of documents that you're going to be sent. One of them is an entire description of sort of the whole Clay grant process, and in there is the links for Kaleidoscope, and once you go in the first time, it'll ask, are you setting up an application? And you'll set up your system with your name, your email. You'll create a password for yourself. So all of that will be explained once you log in. Basically, it's this same link. It's mykaleidoscope.com grants 2021 Clay grants, but this link, and I will send this PowerPoint to everyone after the meeting's over.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. So that's the technical side of stuff. So now let's talk about why you would do this and how you go about creating successful ones. I've been with ODK national headquarters for over 4 years. But I also was a circle advisor back at VCU, and my circle right before I left VCU submitted for a Clay grant and was successful. So there are a number of things looking over the history of the Clay grants that are those items that are what make a successful Clay grant. And these are listed here, and they're not rocket science. A clear purpose for leadership development. That is one of the things that I think a lot of the circles that fail, they don't really explain how this is leadership development. They might call it a leadership program, they might call it something, but how does it promote and develop leaders? You know, there are all kinds of ways to do that. And I'll talk about a couple of programs that are leadership development but don't seem like it. But it is not designed for service projects. In the past, we gave a lot of Clay grants for service, you know, just pure service projects. And that is not what the intent was. The idea of a service project being a leadership development is a good one. And there are a lot of ways to show that leadership is developed through a service project, but that's got to be the focus. If the focus is on leadership, if the focus is on service only, then the grant's not going to be successful. But if the focus is on how students and members are developing leadership through the service project, then that can be successful. And you'll see, I'm going to send you a list of all the CLAY grants over the last 5 years. There are some that are service projects, but they were successful because they focused on the leadership angle of that. Collaboration is another major. There's an entire point value for collaboration, and that's one of the descriptors that you will have to review or you'll have to explain is how are you collaborating with other organizations, with other agencies within the institution. ODK's purpose, its fundamental purpose, is to bring leaders together from across campus. And one of the ways to do that is through a CLAY grant. And so there's got to be some evidence of collaboration. Yes, the circle is doing this, but it can't be done in a vacuum. And that comes to the next point, is that this also needs to be ODK produced. So many of the CLAY grants that have not been successful in the past were, we want $500 so we can give it to the Division of Student Affairs to sponsor this speaker. That's not really, the speaker might be contributing to student development, but what's ODK's role in that other than handing a check over? That's not the role. The point is that ODK needs to be actively engaged. The circle needs to be actively engaged in making sure that this project happens. Being part of a student affairs program, great. Excuse me. But how are the ODK members, how are the ODK leaders participating, learning, and growing from that? Again, part of the program. So if it's an ODK program all in one, that's great. If ODK is part of it, how is ODK's part being described as a leadership? And then one of the other things is there potential for this to become permanent? ODK, a CLAY grant should be seen as seed to start something or to build on something. You might have a program that's great, but it needs an extra push. And this is seed money that can help make that extra push. And so how does this become permanent? How would this stay year after year? And I'll give the example of the one that was done at VCU. It was a faculty recognition program, and their intent, although because of circle leadership, it didn't quite work out that way, but their intent was to create a permanent program that would recognize faculty leaders, and through that process, connect ODK leaders to faculty leaders in a developmental mentoring process. So it was a very cool program. Unfortunately, circle leadership fell apart and they didn't keep it going, but they're actually talking about bringing it back now. So the intent of that program and the reason it won its grant was, the idea was this, we're going to start small. They started with 30 faculty members, and then they wanted to grow it from there. So the intent from the very beginning was the CLAY grant will get us started, and then we're going to find ways through the institution and through other ways to fund it going forward. And really what funding meant was paying for the lunch that brought everybody together. So again, that potential to become permanent is really critical. This is the form I was telling you about. I'm going to pop it up here. Oh, it's probably not going to let me do this. I'm going to have to jump out. Let me come back. So I will send this one to you, but this is really the CLAY grant guide. It is on, you can find it on the website under the CLAY grant stuff. It has all of the information that you need to know about the CLAY grant, the criteria for the award, what the quality of the application needs to be, the bonus points. I'm going to talk about that in a second, the application system, and then of course here's the link that I talked about for there, and of course we had to change the date of the webinar. In here, one of the things that is important is this concept of bonus points. If the program or the service or the circle has not been previously supported. So again, the concept of the CLAY grants is to provide funding to circles who may not have gotten funding or may not have other funding sources. So if this specific program or this circle hasn't been supported by a CLAY grant, that's fine. And as we really talk about CLAY grants for the last 10 years. We don't worry about it. If you got a CLAY grant back in 2008 or something, I think Mike's smiling, that's not important. It's like the last 10 years is really what it is. And then new circles. If the circle is new, we give bonus points because we're trying to help new circles establish that signature leadership program. So if you're a newer circle or you're a revitalized circle, that's one of the things that we're going to consider this year is if your circle was really struggling and you were kind of dormant for 3 or 4 years and now you're coming back, well, you're not a new circle, but you're really revitalized. And so we're going to give those same points to revitalized circles. I've been talking with a couple of circles who didn't initiate for the last 3 years. They finally got their act together last year. And now, they want to apply for a CLAY grant. I'm like, yes, we'll give you those points because you're essentially a new circle again. So that helps in that process. The other things in this application quality that I really want to go over is, the quality of the program brief. There is a program title and then there's a program brief. The program brief is what we use for publicity purposes. That is your key element. That needs to be tight. I want to say it's limited to 100 words. So it has to be, and the word count is actually in the form. That's your sales pitch in that program brief, because that's what we're going to share with our board of trustees. That's what we're going to put on the website. So that's what tells the world what your program is about in 100 words. The detailed plan provides all the other information about how it's going to be leadership development and on and on. But that program brief, really focus some energy on that and make that clean and clear so that if I handed this to somebody who knows nothing about ODK, they would know what your program is about. Always think about it that way. If I handed it to somebody who knew, if I handed it, can't say if I handed it to my wife because she knows about ODK. If I handed it to my neighbor who is a W&L law student, is she going to know what this program is about by reading your program brief? Description of funding. We don't need budgets. We don't need details, but we do need some description. What's the $500 going for? And if it's going to go for a speaker, is it going for just a speaker fee? Is it going to go for speaker fee and transportation? In the days of COVID, and I'll go to that in a second, you're maybe not paying speaker fees, but you might need to enhance some technology, or you might need to pay somebody to edit video. All of those things would actually be okay as long as the program itself is for leadership development. What you're paying for doesn't necessarily have to be directly related to leadership development, but it's supporting the program. So like technology, or we don't have any problem paying for a dinner or a lunch if the program that the lunch is supporting is a leadership development. And one of the great examples is Cumberland University just had a program, and they had one of the original Freedom Riders as a speaker, and it was a luncheon with ODK members, and they did it just recently, so it was live. They were all socially distanced around a great big conference table, 6 feet apart. It was a great event. And those students learned a lot about what it meant to be a leader in the civil rights movement. Perfect example. We paid for the food. We didn't pay for the speaker, but it was a great event. Excuse me. This entire section of this thing, which I'll send to you, but you can get off the line. We are talking about programs in the age of COVID. So there are some things you need to think about, because what you don't want to do is raise doubt in reviewers' minds. So if you say you're going to have a meeting, is that a virtual meeting or is that a real meeting? We don't necessarily want to fund things that could be super spreaders. So think about what you mean. If it's a meeting, is it going to be a Zoom meeting? Is there going to be technology involved? Those kind of things. If you have on-campus events on your campus and those are allowed, you might want to explain how that's allowed and how you're going to do this. You like the Cumberland group. They had it. They had the speaker in a ballroom, and they had all the students at individual tables 6 feet apart. So they could have a lot of people at the speaker because they managed the social distancing. So please make sure you do that. Also, the other things, if your project is related to service in some way, remember that we will not pay a service organization. So we will not, even if it's a leadership development opportunity, we're not going to write a check so that you can give money to Toys for Tots, or we're not going to buy the packaging for a harvest program. We will support other things around that, but we're not a pass-through. Our funds have to go directly to the project itself. And then again, clearly explain, the outcomes of the programming, how the funds will be spent, and then how is this circle being engaged? That's one of the things that gets missed a lot. Making it very clear that the circle members are going to do this, they're going to bring in the community, they're going to bring in other organizations. How is that going to work? That's really important, because if you raise doubts in the reviewers' minds of, well, I'm not really sure how they're going to do this. They say the circle is going to do X, but they don't really explain it. You want to explain that as brief as you can, but remember, you don't want to leave doubt in a reviewer's mind about anything that you say. Make sure that whatever you put out is clear. So yeah, I will send all of this, but I think that's, I'll come back to that thing that I said a little bit before. Assume that the committee knows nothing. Don't assume that the committee knows anything about your project. You can assume that they know about ODK. So if you say your program is going to be focused on the 5 phases, you don't have to explain the 5 phases. But if your program is going to be focused on the 5 phases, you might have to explain how that contributes to the rest of campus in a leadership development way. So think about those kind of things. And of course, the 5-question test, who's the audience, who are the planners, who are the funders, when is it going to happen? All these grants must occur between January 1, and technically the last grant should be completed by November 30th, but we've extended into December sometimes when December works. Where is it going to happen? And that's the real question now. Is it going to be live, or is it going to be Zoom or some other kind of platform? And then, in the end, what's going to be achieved? That's what they're really the most interested in. What is going to be achieved in leadership development if we fund this? I'm going to pause there for a second. Questions at this point from anybody? I lost my chat screen, so.
I know you said you're going to email us the one piece of information for the application process. Are you going to email this entire slideshow presentation?
Yeah, I'm going to email the entire presentation.
Okay, I just wanted to be sure before, because my phone is on the verge of dying, and I just want to make sure that I was able to get all the information in case it cuts out before the end.
Yep, you'll get this. I'll send this and a couple of other attachments.
Okay, thank you so much.
Sure. Okay, so this list of 2015 to 2020, I'm going to send that to you that's a really important list, because that tells you what has been done. Now, I do want to qualify that with say between 2015 and 2020, we have really begun to push the emphasis on the leadership development. So you'll see some things in 2015 and 2016 that lean way too much towards service, and we probably wouldn't grant those. But they won, so I didn't want to exclude them. But let's think about that whole leadership development. The other thing that I wanted to make sure that is clear is that in this year we received gifts in the spring for two of the grants to be focused on diversity, equity, and inclusion. So there is not a special field. You're not going to check off a box and say this grant is for diversity, equity, inclusion. It's going to have to be in your descriptions. So if you want to, if your program is focused on diversity, equity, and inclusion in some manner, you want to make sure that that's very clear in your description. And then the committee will decide whether or not that qualifies for one of the 2 grants. So technically we have 12 grants normally plus 2. So it's really going to be the add-on, and we're going to be looking for those to diversity grants through what people are putting together. And so it's a real opportunity for ODK on your campus to maybe do something new in that whole world of its equity or inclusion or something like that, where you might need a leadership program or enhance a leadership program that's already occurring. So think about that when you're writing. If you've got an opportunity to create a program for the campus or for ODK that can do that, make sure that's very clear in your descriptions. You don't have to call it the diversity project, but I think by describing it, that would really make it very clear. And then the committee will look at that and say, yes, these two fit that, and they're going to receive the diversity grants for 2021. Questions about that? The committee specifically decided that they didn't want any kind of check boxes. They didn't want anything like that because they didn't want there to be some separation. It's really about what the program is about and does it fit the idea that we're trying to reach out to enhance the diversity leadership education through ODK. The grants that generally get accepted, I'm going to go over this again. And not just for the diversity grants, but grants that are inclusive, that are reaching out to new populations and those kind of things, those tend to get higher marks. Again, meaningful engagement, not just people sitting in a room listening to a speaker, but really engaged with the speaker or something going on that enhances the leadership development. Obviously, promoting collaboration, we talked about that, making sure that it's not just ODK, but it's others. It's open to the campus, or it's engaged a whole number of other organizations or departments, or even community agencies, however that works. And then if it's a new program, is it unique? I know that's really hard to do. I was a programmer on a college campus for a number of years, and finding new programs was really kind of hard to do. But the concept is if you can do this in a new way, or take a unique approach to a program that you already have, then that's going to win you more points, as it were, with the reviewers. They're going to see that a little bit higher. The things that don't get accepted, limited scope. Now, some projects are narrow in and of themselves. The one that I mentioned for Cumberland University, that was a very small program. It was the person coming in, speaking to a large group, and then a lunch with ODK leaders. Had a lot of the, so it wasn't a large. It doesn't have to be a large program, but is the scope narrow? And in that case, the scope was very broad because it was all about leadership development, mentoring, expanding the horizons of the students that were connected. So it wasn't really narrow in its scope. It was small in its size. And restricted audience. If it's too small, again, using the Cumberland example, the luncheon was for ODK members only, but the other program with the speaker and the interaction with him was for the whole campus. So it was a combination of large and small. So the audience wasn't really restricted at all, and that in one part of it. Another part, obviously, it was, but that's the benefit to the ODK members who are part of that program. And then one of the things that happens is, for us, a lot of times programs can happen on your campus if you're not a registered student organization. So you ought to check that before you do this, because we did have one organization, one circle a couple of years ago who applied for a CLAY grant. They weren't registered, and so they couldn't use any space on campus. And so then they had problem creating their program, and they didn't check that in advance. So I just thought I'd throw that in there, because we have had a circle that ran into struggles about that. They eventually solved it. They just registered as an organization, but they couldn't reserve space because they weren't registered with the university, although they were an active circle. You don't have to be registered with your university to be an active ODK circle. It helps always. So just make sure of that. A couple of other things I'm going to mention, and these are ways to use a CLAY grant. The National Leadership Conference, it will be virtual, April 8th through the 10th, 2021. Using the CLAY grant to support individuals or a proposal. So if a CLAY grant is used to support individuals presenting at the national conference, in the past, that has been an acceptable CLAY grant use. It's a little different because we're not sending people. It's a virtual conference. We don't even know how much we're going to charge for this. So I don't know that that works necessarily for 2021, but in the future, that has been accepted as a use of a CLAY grant. And then I just put the National Day of Service in there because it's one of our national programs. Again, if you want to do a program for the National Day of Service, tie it to a CLAY grant. Remember that the CLAY grant part has to be about leadership development, but you can tie a leadership and service program together that way. We also have just recently launched a partnership with True Colors International, the personality and leadership assessment company. We have 2 workshops coming up, one on the 23rd and one on the 14th for collegiate members. There is a possibility, there is a way in which True Colors through ODK can work with a circle to produce a workshop solely for the circle or for your campus. And so if you're interested in that concept for a CLAY grant, please email me, tim@odk.org, because we want to talk to you about that. If you wanted to have True Colors do a training program for your circle, the CLAY grant could sponsor that or sponsor part of that. Same thing with True Colors certification. If you were interested in having staff members at your campus and your ODK members and even community members be certified, it's a very expensive process, but because ODK has a partnership, we can cut that cost almost in half. And so if you were interested in having that kind of certification, leadership development opportunity, the CLAY grant might be able to cover part of that cost and decrease the cost even more for the circle and for the individuals. And then we also have the Stone Ethical Leadership Challenge. That's available. We are retooling it for a virtual world. It was originally designed for an in-person delivery, so we're retooling it for that. There's really no cost here. In the past, it would have been the CLAY grant would have covered the travel of the facilitator. Now, I don't even know how that's going to work because we're going to probably do it in this kind of format. So there's really no cost there. But you might think about that if you have the ability to deliver programs on campus. That might be something to think about. Both of those, you can find the information on the ODK website. If you just go and search True Colors or search Stone in the search bar, then the full information about those programs will come up. So those are national programs that are available to you. And so think about the concept of, can you partner with a national program to pay for the CLAY grant, or the CLAY grant to pay for the national program. That's it. So questions. So yeah, put the deadline up there so you won't forget that. What did I miss? What do you still have questions about?
Well, I don't know if you guys noticed, but I lost connection with the session. So I did miss quite a bit of information. I noticed it's being recorded. Will we be able to get the recording?
Yep. Actually, as soon as I have to edit a little bit in the front and the back of this, as I always do, but I'll try to get these up by the end of the week. So sometime over the weekend, and I'll also send the whole PowerPoint.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Yep. And it will be up on ODK HQ YouTube. That's where we put everything on our YouTube channel. Other questions?
Tim, I had a question.
Sure.
On our MMS login, it says on the bottom, like there's some fields that are red for FY 2021, and then on the bottom it says award eligible no. Yep. Is that because of our fall 2021 or our fiscal year 2021 things are not updated, or is
correct? Because a lot of the things from fiscal 2021 you haven't done yet.
Right. That's what I was like.
So, yep. Yep. So things like you can't submit an annual report yet because it's not available, and you can't have points for a variety of things. So that's why it all says fiscal 2021. Perfect. As those things start to happen, then you'll click on them. So
we're like, we always do everything. I don't know why it says that. I'm like, I'm sure we're fine. Just relax.
That's right. We have tried to work on a system of which we thought about leaving the stuff for 2020 in there because you were completed. But the problem with that is then you might think, oh, well, we're done.
We did it. Right.
So,
and And then my only other question for that is that our circle coordinator and faculty advisor, myself, have not changed. So do we need to do new advisor agreements, or we're good?
Nope. The advisor agreements are once in a lifetime. So once you've done it, and that'll stay marked. It's only if you transition advisors, and when students transition, they should automatically fill out the form. A lot of circles last year did not get the points for annually updating because they didn't update their students. Their advisors are automatic, but they forgot to update their students. So
perfect. Yep, we're good on that end. Thank you.
Sure. Other questions from anybody? If you have a question at any point, do not hesitate to shoot me an email, tim@odk.org. Always glad to answer things. You know, if you're wrestling with something, you're not quite sure about wording or something, just let me know. I don't vote, so I'm free to give out all the advice I can give out. The rest of the group is the one making the emails. The other thing I'm going to give you a heads up on, the National Awards Committee is going to try and do some things this year to where that we want to try and boost the number of applications. Our applications for Clay Grants, Leader of the Year, those kind of things have all really fallen off. And so the National Awards Committee this year is going to do some individual reach out from each of the committee members to a variety of circles. So you may see emails from somebody who is not me, and asking you to think about Clay Grants. Obviously, all of you already are, but also the Circle Leader of the Year. We really want to see the Circle Leader of the Year process. There's no reason not to recognize somebody on your campus. You've got somebody in your ODK circle who is a wonderful leader. They may not be the president or the treasurer of your circle, but they're a wonderful leader and they should be recognized. I have a lot of advisors who say, well, but I don't think my person is National Leader of the Year quality. Let the committee decide that. Let the individual decide that. You should decide that you've got an individual in your campus, in your circle, who is an outstanding leader, somebody who is deserving of that title. And we recognize them, and then they can determine whether or not they want to apply. And if they apply, the awards committee determines whether or not they're National Leader of the Year quality. Catherine West, who's the 2018 Circle Leader of the Year, National Leader of the Year, she didn't even know about the program until her advisor walked in one day and said, you have to apply for this. I've nominated you as Circle Leader of the Year, and you're going to have to apply for the National Leader of the Year because you deserve it. And she won. So it's one of those things where, we really want to see more of our leaders being recognized for being the leaders they are. That's the recognition part of ODK. So as you're thinking that, please make sure that you are considering who that is. Some circles have a very elaborate process and vote on it and all that stuff. And in some circles, it's really the advisor who says, I'm going to pick somebody. We don't have rules on that. It's completely up to the circle. So that's my last plug. Anything else from anybody? Any questions? We had general questions, but we've got a few minutes. Any questions about ODK? Anything that I can help with while we're on? All right. Well, if not, thank you all for attending. Really glad to see you all. I will look forward to seeing your applications in our new system. And again, if you've got questions about it, don't hesitate to email me, or if it's a technical problem, don't hesitate to email the support folks at Kaleidoscope. All right.
Thanks, Tim.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Thanks, everyone. Be well.
Bye.